All right. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? It is Kevin with Optimize Essentials, and today I'm going to be talking to you about why bodybuilding is imbalance building, right? Imbalance bodybuilding. Unless you are aware of what I'm going to be talking to you about today, and that is posture and functionality, right? Now, don't get me wrong, guys. Bodybuilding is something I still do. I love it. It's still what I do until this day. It's what got me in this fitness journey. I know a lot of people are going to be kind of defensive about it right from the get-go if they're a bodybuilder, but there comes a point in your life where you have to question the efficacy of what you're doing, or better put, you have to ask questions about what is it that I'm practicing and is it getting results? Is what I'm practicing correct? Is what I'm practicing true? Is what I'm practicing effective? And if it's not, what should I do about it? What can I do about it, right? Just a quick kind of tangent, kind of like religion, right? Sorry if I step on some toes, but a lot of people who practice religion kind of get handed down from parents or teachers and whatnot, and they never really question it. Or even when they do, and if it doesn't make sense to them, they still believe in it, they still follow it. In terms of bodybuilding or fitness, when you're experiencing pain or tension or stiffness somehow, and you're not questioning what you're doing, or you're not trying to figure out a solution, then you're kind of putting yourself not necessarily at risk, but you're kind of diminishing your potential, your human spirit, because you're not practicing what is true to yourself, even though you know what you're doing isn't exactly producing the result that you want. Hence the term efficacy, right? Is what you're producing or what you're practicing effective? So with that being said, I wanted to share with you why I believe bodybuilding is imbalance building, and why you should kind of pay attention to what I'm about to share with you today. So recently or lately, I've been getting a lot into posture, into kind of functional training, right? A lot of people have their own definition of what functional training and proper posture is. But in the best way I can put it is your body's most optimized state, right? In terms of posture, there's anatomical landmarks that you can measure and whatnot to make sure your body is in the most neutral position. But in my opinion, functionality and posture should be relative. It should feel the most strong and most functional movement or body position that you are capable of achieving, because all of us are asymmetrical to some degree, but there are certain things we can do to maximize our equilibrium in terms of our posture. And most of us aren't aware of this. Most of us have imbalances. Most of us have muscle imbalances from either sitting too much, not exercising, or exercising incorrectly, hence bodybuilding. And bodybuilding in itself, purely done alone, is not exactly functional, because when you are doing one movement over and over and over again to build that certain muscle, and you're not integrating it as a system, which I'm going to be talking to you, there's 5 things I wanted to go over to help you identify whether or not you're building imbalances in your body and what you can do about it, right? So let's say, for example, you're average Joe, you're a sedentary person, or you're someone who goes to the gym and you do your typical bench press, squats, your deadlifts, and machine work, right? If you've been sitting all day, or you don't know how to exercise, chances are you have very weak hips or very tight hips. You have a very weak core or very tight core. Either one of these could be tight or weak and whatnot. There's very many different combinations in this puzzle. And if you don't address it, there's a very good chance that you'll have different types of pelvic tilts, right? I've covered them in my videos. You might have a posterior pelvic tilt where your butt is tucked underneath you, where you might have an anterior pelvic tilt where your hips are stuck, where your butt is stuck forward or your pelvis is tipped forward. You might have an elevated pelvis where your pelvis elevates up. You might have a rotated pelvis where your pelvis rotates to a certain side direction. All of these can happen, guys. The reason why these happen is because either your hip flexors get tight, or one quad gets tight than the other, one hamstring gets more tight than the other. You might have rounded shoulders from sitting too much. Your rib cage is compressed and you're closed forward and you have a hunchback, kyphotic posture. You might have your cervical spine, which is the spine, the upper portion of your spine, the cervical spine. You might have tightness on one side, and you might have a lateral flexion of your head, meaning your head is tilted to one side. You might have a rotated cervical spine. So all of these are imbalances that if you don't want to pay attention to and you go into the gym and you do the same movement over and over again, you're going to be building in imbalances. Does it make sense? I'm not attacking bodybuilding necessarily as like this is wrong, you must not do it. No, it's if you're going to do it correctly, integrate it within your system, right? So let's say an individual has rounded shoulders, the typical hunchback, they're just hunched forward and their rib cage is closed, and they go inside the gym and they decide to do a bench press. And not only do that, but they do 3 sets of flat bench, they do 3 sets of incline bench, or they do a bunch of machine work, and they keep pressing forward. Well, as many of you guys maybe already know if you're watching this, the chest is an internal rotator of the arm, the humerus. So when you're strengthening your chest, you're going to be causing the tone of the pecs to be more tonic, right? To be even more tight. So you're pulling yourself even more into that position. So you can't really build your chest if you have poor posture. You're just going to look like those people who walk around. There's some people who actually look like they walk around with really like imbalanced front side because they don't really work out their back, or they don't know how to properly work it out. So in a sense, that's how you build your imbalances, because if you're already imbalanced going inside of the gym, you're going to have more imbalances, right? And another thing, right? If you have a weak core, if you have weak glutes, or if you have excessively tight hips, if you're doing squats and you're loading that foundation up and you have an excessive anterior or posterior pelvic tilt, you're simply exacerbating that, guys. I hope that makes sense. But I don't want to go too much into the combinations of what could go on, what could happen, what type of postural deviations you have. I just want you to understand that bodybuilding is imbalance building if you have imbalances to begin with. So what can you do about it? The idea behind bodybuilding properly is, one, mitigate your imbalances, right? Try to balance out your body as much as you can prior to bodybuilding. So that means stretching beforehand, right? But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I wrote down 5 things that I want you to think about and reflect on without being defensive, because a lot of us have the tendency to want to shy away from something when we're being attacked. But guys, look, I've suffered pain and I'm still working on some things in my body. I don't have much pain anymore in my body in terms of musculoskeletal pain because I do a lot of work, but it's because I understand these points that allow me to do so, right? So you want to make sure you address these prior to bodybuilding if you want to do it correctly, okay? So number 1, how often do you stretch? How often do you stretch your body? Not just the random like toe touch where you're bouncing and trying to stretch out your hamstrings, or where you're pulling your quads up and you're trying to stretch out your quads. That, guys, is, yes, stretching technically, but you're not stretching correctly. What I want to ask is, are you stretching thoroughly and properly? People say, or the definition of yoga is union, right? When you do yoga, you're connecting with your body. You're feeling what's going on in your body. You're really in touch with what's going on in your body. And when you're doing that properly, when you're doing that correctly, you stretch properly. So you want to learn how to properly stretch your body so that you're in the best, most biomechanically sound, structured position before you go into the workout, right? And there's a bunch of videos you can find. There's a lot of free mobility routines, a lot of stretching routines that you can find. If you guys needed something that comes from me, check out my website. I have a postural assessment, a stretching protocol that you can get. It's very cheap. It'll help me out. It'll help you out. But yeah, it's a great way to start. And then number 2, how often do you strengthen your core and your glutes? As I mentioned earlier, if your core or your glutes are weak or they're excessively tight, you're guaranteed, I promise you, if not now, eventually you will experience a lot of postural distortions in your body, which will lead to musculoskeletal pain in the future. Core and your glutes. Those are the 2 most important muscle groups. All right, yes, your cervical spine will matter as well, but often this core trunk foundation here will have the biggest impact on everything else. All right, and then how often do you train your slings? How often do you train different planes of motions? Your slings, there's your anterior and posterior oblique slings. There's different types of sling systems in your body, but your slings basically, like it sounds like a sling. You can kind of sling your body back and forth, all right? These muscles allow you to rotate in the transverse plane, allow you to go in different planes of motion. When you're running, you're using your slings because you have to rotate as you take a step. You have to rotate as you take a step. And when you're not training this type of functional movement, you're missing out on a lot of functionality. You're missing a lot of integration. Because bodybuilding is so isolated, you're focusing on a specific muscle body part, but you're not integrating it as a functional movement. And because of that, you're going to develop a lot of imbalances, guys. It's not whether or if, it's guaranteed you will if you don't do this. I promise you. And then number 4, how often do you train accessory movements, right? Bodybuilding, when you just do curls and the big muscle body parts, but you're not paying attention to your muscles like your intrinsic stabilizers, which consist of your multifidi, your pelvic floor, your transverse abdominis. When you don't train these intrinsic stabilizers, your body might look externally buff, but inside you're weak as hell. And because of that, you're gonna be suffering from your lifts. You won't be able to lift as much weight just because your stabilizers are weak. So you want to make sure you strengthen smaller muscles like your glute medius, your TVA, your multifidi, your pelvic floor muscles. You want to pay attention to those muscles because they will produce a bunch of power if you can integrate it, all right? And then number 5, the last one, technique, form, right? A lot of people get this wrong. You go to the gym, not only do they do bodybuilding, but people bodybuild incorrectly. That's why most people look like shit, right? Excuse my French, but most people look very, very unaesthetic, right? They train improperly. They have very poor proportions. They don't know how to kind of train for proportions, and because of that, not to say that I look very amazing, but there's an art to bodybuilding. You need to learn how to train for your upper body compared to your waist, and it's the X factor, the V taper, whatever you want to call it, but there's the golden ratio that you want to train for so that you look symmetric, so that you look good, guys. That's bodybuilding. It's an art. And a lot of people do bodybuilding with poor form, so they have ugly proportions, ugly muscles, and not only that, they don't know how to integrate their system. So if you don't integrate your system, you have poor form, you have poor posture. Now do you guys see why bodybuilding is imbalanced bodybuilding, right? So anyhow, that's all I wanted to share with you guys today. Thank you for staying until the end. I know these videos can get kind of long, but I want to kind of expand your awareness on the inherent dangers of bodybuilding incorrectly, right? So don't get me wrong, I love bodybuilding, I still do it, but I'm slowly evolving to a point where I'm trying more to integrate functionality as opposed to pure bodybuilding, because bodybuilding by itself will build imbalances, and I guarantee it, if you don't have any right now, you eventually will, and you'll care once you suffer enough pain, tension, or have an injury. You're gonna come back to this, you're gonna watch all my videos, and I'm gonna thank you either way, all right? So thank you guys, have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments below. If you gained value out of this, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. That'll help boost the algorithm on YouTube. Share it with your friends, because I want to get the word out there on how people can improve and optimize their life. And if you need more help, check out my programs at optimizeessentials.com. It is Kevin, and I am out. I'll be back for more, most definitely. Peace.